Hi, I'm Chuck with Propstore, and we are here with Michael and Denise Okuda. They are legends in the Star Trek world, having sort of helped develop the mythos of Star Trek over the years. But why don't you guys introduce yourself? You can do a much better job than I'm sure I can.
Hi, I'm Michael Okuda. I was a graphic designer on Star Trek for a lot of years and had a lot of fun doing it.
I'm Denise Okuda, and I was honored enough to work on Star Trek for many, many years. Not as many as this guy right here. I don't know if people know this, but Mike worked on more Star Trek than anybody but Gene Roddenberry,
Wow.
which I think is awesome.
Wow. First of all, how did the two of you meet? Was it on the set of Star Trek?
Sort of on the set of Star Trek. Denise was a consultant to the art department on the pilot episode of Next Generation.
Okay.
And she came up to the art department.
I came up to the art department, and of course it was very exciting, you know, all these creative people. And above one desk was a bulletin board, and on that bulletin board was a little maquette, a little puppet of the character Max Headroom. I don't know if you
yeah, of
remember.
course. Yes.
Okay.
Classic 80s.
Loved that show. It
Yeah.
was so far ahead of itself. And I basically turned to everyone that was there and said, whose desk is this? Met Mike.
As far as your history on Star Trek, so when did you officially join the Star Trek team after being a consultant for that first pilot
It was
episode?
a couple years later on Star Trek The Next Generation, when they originally didn't have video monitors on the set, and I would go in and I would help with that. Then I worked on Star Trek VI, and from there I was hired on Star Trek Deep Space Nine, and I have worked pretty much through the end of Enterprise, and then we went on to Star Trek Remastering and so forth at CBS, and we've never stopped working on Star Trek for all of these years, whether it be production or projects. We think, okay, this is the last project we're going to work on, and something always comes up.
We both started as Star Trek fans watching the original
series,
Right.
of course.
on our respective
Because it was
parents
on
living
TV all the time.
Yes.
Which this generation doesn't necessarily understand as much, but it was one of those things that you could always tune in and you could always find a Star Trek episode.
One of the biggest, most amazing things that ever happened in fandom was that Star Trek the Motion Picture happened because
Yes.
the fans demanded it. And Roddenberry wanted to thank the fans, so he invited a bunch of fans to come in to be Enterprise crew members for Star Trek the Motion Picture, for which I'm very jealous, by the way. Mm-hmm. And Denise was
I was an extra on the rec deck, and not only was I an extra, I was a Vulcan.
Oh.
So I went through makeup, got the ears, the whole 9 yards, and it was fantastic. It was an amazing day. I kept my ears. I don't know where they are. They're somewhere in the garage, but I kept my ears.
Hopefully for the next auction we can offer those.
I don't know where they are. But yeah, I was an extra in the rec deck scene of Star Trek the Motion Picture. That was a long time ago.
So this is a piece that is from Encounter at Farpoint, which was that pilot episode that was worn by John Delancey, who played Q. And it was part, I believe, of his third costume that he wore when he first met Picard. It was a sort of gray, spacey...
It was a 21st century military armor or something.
Yes.
Yes. This actually was provided by William Ware Tice, who was the costume designer for not only Next Generation, but the original Star Trek
yes.
series.
We've had some of his sketches in the past, yes.
I got hold of this pin because fast forward several years, many years, at the end of Enterprise, we did a Mirror Universe episode, and we knew that our writers were thinking about somehow tying the Mirror Universe into an appearance of Colonel Green, which never happened, but they were talking about it. So I was gonna, I made a flag with this design for the Mirror Defiant. But of course, that chain of events fell apart. But
and I think you commented to me that this necessarily may have been an off-the-shelf pin. It's got a very interesting design, sort of like the eye on the back of the dollar bill.
Yeah, it's kind of an Illuminati thing.
I always figured it was because Q was Q was a Q, that this was the symbol of the Q that was established early on in Star Trek Next Generation, and then, as you said, it was reused later on.
Yeah. I don't really know where it came from. I think this was probably made by Maggie Strepek at Studio Arts.
But it lived on, and
But
it became part of Star Trek lore.
It lived on. And in fact, at one point during the second season of Star Trek Picard, they were thinking of putting a Q symbol in the main title sequence. So this is what I suggested. So I sent a sketch in, but they didn't use it.
All the way through Picard, 30-something
Yes.
years later, 35 years
Well,
later.
it didn't make it into the final, but it was it was a possibility.
But you have to be prepared.
Yeah.
Rebooting Star Trek was very exciting because A, we were working for Gene Roddenberry, the guy who started it all, but also because Gene had the vision and the courage to say, okay, we did this before, we're going to do it differently. So I went to Gene and said, look, I want to riff for the control panels on the Enterprise D. I want to riff off of what Matt Jeffries did because I love what Matt did. And Gene said, no, I don't want to do that. I want to do something very different because we're 100 years in the future. And that gave me the freedom, the responsibility of saying, okay, let's do something completely different. So it gave me the ability to think, how might this look interesting and how might this look functional? And that's what led to what has become known as the LCARS style.
Which we have a number of different LCARS represented here, and I know collectors love those things. They love the graphics, they love the fact that they light up, but they're just so also Star Trek. They've become part of the fabric of Star Trek.
Well, when we started Next Generation, I told Roddenberry and Bob Justman, I think graphics can be an important part of the show. First of all, I think they help generate the identity of the ship and of the show, but also if you use graphics intelligently, they can be relatively inexpensive, so you can get a big visual impact at relatively low cost. And once they understood that, they turned me loose, so I got to do control panels and signage and all kinds of fun things.
Yes, and we have a few examples. Were LCARS an opportunity for you to maybe put some inside jokes into the graphics?
When we started Star Trek Next Generation, and actually throughout most of my tenure at Paramount, Star Trek was shot on 35mm motion picture film, which is inherently high resolution, but it was intended to be aired on standard definition television. So yeah, I put little labels on the icons and the buttons and things, but you never really saw what they said. So a lot of times I would put the initials of people who work in the show.
Oh.
And
Nice way to pay homage to them.
pay homage to my coworkers, and people loved it, and it was fun. And it also meant that I could use the same control panel, same button layout on a number of different things because it didn't specifically say impulse reactor temperature.
Right, right.
And it was totally fine because NTSC standard definition television is pretty fuzzy. So you can do a lot of that. Now in the early 2000s, the industry moved to high definition, and suddenly, oh my goodness,
People are seeing those inside jokes. Yes.
people are seeing those things.
So the edict went down, no more jokes. Yeah.
Or fewer jokes, and make sure that you.
They're very small.
Nobody will be offended
Yeah.
if they actually are able to.
Well,
do
it's not a matter of offending. It's if you're watching the show and you're caught up in the drama.
Do you want to get out of the universe?
I do not want to do you, the audience, the disservice of pulling you out of the story.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Especially from Gene Roddenberry, who was very focused on the story.
And especially for those of us who were Star Trek fans, and we want the people watching it to enjoy the show.
Yeah.